All right. Lastly, let's talk about, we've been talking around in terms of like the political implications. Do you have any sense of like what the administration thinks they're going to be able to get away with in terms of pretending we have no leverage over Israel, except for like all that money and the weaponry? Like it's been sort of fascinating how they're both sort of simultaneously playing this like, where can we find the leverage? And they're like literally holding a lever in their hand.
Right. And you have that amazing quote from the Israeli Minister of Defense from early on in the conflict, where he says, like, when they're asking about humanitarian aid, he's like, the U.S. wants us to allow humanitarian aid in. The U.S. is providing us with all of our weapons and material. What do you want us to tell them? No.
This is him answering his own critics in the Israeli in the ruling coalition of that party. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, what do you want us to tell them? No. That's all you need to understand about the relationship between Israel and the United States. Yet today you have Anthony Blinken like speeding out of town in his motorcade while with Netanyahu resuming the war in precisely the way that Blinken told him they should not resume it.
Oh, but Ryan, they're sending out flyers with QR codes. So
with no
all
internet.
you have to do in Gaza is get your smartphone and use and click on the QR code, and you'll be able to go to a designated safe zone that's probably not that safe. It's just.
And how many people can you fit in these safe zones? They've evacuated the north.
This was already the most densely populated, whatever it is. I don't know how many square
25
miles.
square miles or something in the world.
In the world. And you've basically halved, if not more than halved, the land area where it's supposedly everybody, is safe. But and then you're chopping it up like Swiss cheese, essentially. It's absurd. It's absurd.
And you mentioned Blinken. Blinken had a quote yesterday where he said, and it seemed like this is a bit of a slight turn in the rhetoric, where he said that, the Israeli government has one of the most, quote, sophisticated militaries in the world, and it is capable of neutralizing the threat posed by Hamas while minimizing harm to innocent men, women, and children. To me, that seems like him publicly saying, well, they can do it if they want to, but they're not doing it, and it's our hands are clean if that's the case. We know that that's not obviously true. The United States could do way more. But the 972 and Guardian pieces that came out yesterday, speaking about how the Israeli government is using artificial intelligence to AI to specifically target every bombing location, and they know when civilians are there. Like the precision of their weaponry is well known and is now being stated publicly by the Biden administration, and yet still we are behind them, even though we know that they are targeting these citizens deliberately. And the question is, like, I clearly know that it seems like Biden, he had that 1970-ish meeting with Golda Meir and has changed his life forever or whatever. But, so ideologically, maybe he's a lost cause. But in terms of the domestic pressure here, what's your sense of, if that's real from an electoral perspective, and if it really can change, force them to change course in any way?
Yeah, on the ideology of Biden, you remember, I forget who did this story first. Maybe I think it's Jeremy Scahill had a piece about how in the early 1980s, when Israel invaded Lebanon and absolutely wreaked havoc, Begin met with Biden, and Biden was telling him, you should just take the gloves off. Don't worry about civilian casualties. You have a job to do. And Begin, total war criminal, told him, easy there, buddy. We don't talk like that. Like that, you need to step back a little bit. And then Ronald Reagan got on the phone with Begin, and by the end of the call had forced Begin to reach a ceasefire. So he was to the right of Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. And so are they going to feel any pressure? I think there's feeling some. I think that Blinken comment, but also some of the other ones that have been made public, where he's saying, you cannot conduct, and Biden has said the same thing to them, you cannot conduct the second half of this war the way you conducted the first half. Like you have to do something more targeted. You cannot just completely flatten southern Gaza after flattening northern Gaza. So they're changing their rhetoric, but like you said, they have total leverage, and Israel's doing this anyway. The one thing they announced today, that they're going to put visa restrictions, I don't know if you saw this, on quote unquote violent settlers.
Yes, the U.S. is going to put visas restrictions on extremist settlers in the West Bank, which you'll hit like potentially half the population that are coming from Brooklyn, essentially.
Exactly. If you
but not the ones that have come from the former Soviet Union.
Right, but it's a huge number of them who go back and forth to the United States, and if you told them that they couldn't come to the United States anymore, that would be kind of life-changing.
Yeah.
Now, how they're going to enforce that and how they identify who qualifies for it. So that's an example of a thing they can do.
Right.
And on top of like conditioning the aid. I mean, that seems to be, there seems to be growing sentiment in the Senate to do that. At least like I've read up to 20 senators in the Senate are bandering that about. Have you heard anything more? I know that you guys reported, I think, was it Klippenstein reported that Bernie Sanders may introduce this, but in a couple of weeks.
Bernie said he was thinking about it. He told Dan Boguslaw that. Yeah, it's hard. It would take at least 2 weeks, even if you introduce it today, to make the resolution privileged. And there's so many people in Gaza who are just, fighting the clock at this point. Right. Blinken told Israel in a meeting recently, when Israel said this is going to take us several months to finish this, he was like, you don't have that credit. Like the world's not going to allow that, which means that Israel then, what they often do with their Gaza wars toward the end, they ramp it up. Just everything in the kitchen is just sent out.
So let's send them more ingredients without conditions.
Right, exactly.
And not just more ingredients. It's like a 4 years worth of supply. If we're talking $14 billion, my math's not great, but it's around what 3 to 3.5 billion we send them annually. So that's like the scale of the weaponry we're talking about.
Yeah, and the place is basically uninhabitable.
Yes.
Yet 2 million people have to live there.
Ryan Grimm, we'll put a link to your book. Thanks for joining us today. Just the level of destruction in Gaza, it really is unimaginable at this point.